Hey guys, welcome to the third episode of this 1967 Triumph Spitfire Mark III. Not many Spitfires, especially roundtails, on my channel, so I'm sure there's many of you who are enjoying this. We've seen lots of TR6 engine rebuilds and stuff like that, but now we have a Spitfire, and it just occurred to me when we were taking the engine out with David that I've only rebuilt one Spitfire engine in my experience so far in the last 10 years, and that was my own Spitfire. So this car came here for mainly engine rebuild, but also we need to do some interior work, and it's gonna go back on the road. So we started it, and actually I was surprised how well it ran, but we found two main issues. One of them was low compression on some of the cylinders. We had 110 on the first one, 140 if I remember well on the second, 130 on the third, and 150 on the fourth. If they were close together, 130 to 150, it's not a great compression, but I wouldn't rebuild an engine that has only this as a problem, like compression between 130 and 140, let's say, or 140, 150. But the difference between first and fourth was big. We need to have the cylinders within 10%. If our lowest is 140, let's say, our highest shouldn't be more than 10%, 14, so 154. More than 10% causes vibrations, misfiring, and stuff like that. So that was one of the things that we determined. And the other thing that we figured was that the oil pressure was pretty low. At a cold start, when the pressure is the highest, because the oil is still thick, we had 50 psi. And then when it warmed up and the oil thinned down, it became about 20 psi, and that was even at 1500 RPM. We didn't even lower it more than that. If we lowered the RPM to 1000 or 900 even, I'm sure the pressure was going to be even lower than 20. So these were the problems that we figured out, and we decided that yes, we're going to have to take the engine apart, even if we chose to run it for a while and see if the compression was going to come back, because sometimes low compression on an engine that's out for a long time is caused by seized rings or valves that sat open for too long and they got a little bit of surface rust, or the cylinders might be glazed. You know, sometimes when you run the engine for a longer time, the compression comes back. But the low pressure was what was worrying us, and that's why we decided that we're gonna go ahead with rebuilding it. So in the second episode, Chef Tash came and helped me. We took the engine and the transmission out and we stripped it. We inspected everything visually, and we were surprised to find brand new parts in it. This engine was freshly rebuilt maybe 30 years ago, but it hasn't seen lots of mileage after that. I haven't spoken to Peter, but I'm gonna ask him. Maybe he took it somewhere to be rebuilt, and after the rebuild it never ran properly, because he was telling me that initially in his youth this car ran like a charm. So maybe after the restoration they never set it up properly, or they never rebuilt it properly. So we're gonna figure that out, what happened. What we found inside is new pistons, new bearings, new valve guides, bronze ones, new valves. So the pistons are 20 over, the bearings, the connecting rod and the main rod bearings are 10 under. The crankshaft looks fantastic, I mean, nice and shiny. The camshaft, I think the camshaft has a little bit of an issue, at least visually. I think some of the cams look more pointed than others. Some others have like a flat spot on top. We're gonna measure that. Maybe it's just my eyes, so we're gonna measure that precisely to make sure that I'm not wrong. Hopefully I am. So I know I'm talking a lot, but this video is gonna be like that. It's not gonna be a lot of work, it's gonna be more theory, because today we're gonna have to go through all the parts and measure and assess and figure out where our problems are coming from. First of all, the compression, and second, the oil pressure. All right, so before we start taking measurements, let's figure out what we're gonna be looking for. So first of all, for the low compression, what can cause low compression? Well, oversized cylinders or undersized rings. If they don't match, then compression can escape around them. But another thing is also if the cylinders are too smooth, if they're glazed like what I think we have here, you need to have a little bit of cross hatching, and that helps for the rings to seal. Another reason, well, let's go up, head gasket. If the head gasket wasn't good enough, which I don't think it was a problem here, but if your head gasket is not good and it has little areas where compression can escape between the head and the cylinder, that also can cause low compression, right? But if that happens, usually you see traces on the gasket when you remove the head, but also where will that compression go? That's extremely hot gases, right? They can escape into the water galleries and go into the water jacket, which causes pressurizing of your coolant system and also overheating. But we didn't experience anything like that. And last but not least, we can have valves that don't close very well. So if the valves are not closed, obviously compression can escape from there. But we looked at the head, especially first cylinder, because that was the one with the lowest compression. So we looked at the valve seats and the actual valves, and we didn't see anything wrong with them. So for me, the problem was either the size of the cylinder or the fact that it is so shiny. So that's what we're going to be looking at mostly. How about the oil pressure now? What can cause low oil pressure? So I'm sure that most of you know that, but I want to explain it to the other part of my audience who are not very familiar with how the oil system works. So what we have here, if you look at the side of the engine, this is the main oil gallery, this pipe here. It has a plug in the front, it has a plug on the back, and from here, where the oil pump mounts, it mounts right here. It takes oil from the bottom of the engine, pumps it up, it goes to the oil filter, it gets filtered and fills the oil gallery, this entire oil gallery. Here on the side we have a pressure relief valve. It's a plunger that closes the hole and a spring behind it. If for whatever reason we have some extreme oil pressure, then the plunger gets pushed and overcomes the tension of the spring behind it, and then the oil starts bypassing and going back into the crankcase, I believe. So after the oil filter, the oil still pressurized goes into the oil gallery. And the oil gallery is like manifold. It has multiple little holes here and there that deliver oil to different places. One of these little holes goes in this direction right into this bushing here to lubricate the distributor drive gear. Another output of the oil gallery is this one, which goes out and it goes to the oil pressure gauge. And the other outputs are internal. They go towards the inside of the engine and into the main bearings. So these three holes here are connected to the oil gallery. If you look at it this way, you can see here this little pipe-shaped thing comes from the oil gallery. Oil gets delivered to this T here. Some of it comes towards the main bearing, some of it comes to the camshaft bearing. And it is the same here as well. At T, one gallery comes up to the main bearing, one gallery goes down to the camshaft bearing. Except on the rearmost one, camshaft bearing, we also have another hole which I have to move you for. It is down there. I hope you can see it on the camshaft bearing. So that hole takes oil towards the head and lubricates the rocker shaft. So as you can see, we have many oil galleries. That's why it is important our main bearings to be super tight. Otherwise, oil is just gonna start escaping from here, and that's gonna reduce our oil pressure. And then oil doesn't get delivered to the camshaft, doesn't get delivered to the head, etc., etc. Also, once oil gets delivered here to the main bearing, it also goes through the crankshaft into the connecting rod bearings. Let me show you that part. Here is our crankshaft, and if you look at it, it has oil galleries right through it. You see this oil gallery here, that is drilled, and it connects this hole with this hole. So the oil lubricates here, but also it gets pushed into that hole on the crankshaft, and it gets pushed through the crankshaft to the connecting rod bearing as well. So first of all, we need to check the oil pump itself and make sure that the tolerances inside are not too big, because then the oil pump won't be able to pump oil at all. But if the oil pump checks out, this means that we're building high pressure, but we're losing it somewhere. What are the places where we can lose it? First of all, the oil pressure relief valve. If the spring on the relief valve is too loose, we can never build high oil pressure, because as we're building it, we are losing it through that valve. So we need to make sure that the spring is good and the plunger closes well, because if we have a damaged seat there, for example, the plunger wouldn't close well, and even if the spring is good, then the pressure can still escape. So we're gonna have to check that. Another place which is often neglected is the tolerance between the bushing here for the distributor drive gear and the actual shaft on the drive gear. We need to make sure that the tolerance there is not too big and oil is not escaping between the two components. Then of course we're gonna check all these oil passages, make sure that they are true, even though if one of them is blocked, the pressure is not gonna drop. Oil is not gonna get delivered to this bearing, for example, but the pressure in the gallery is still going to be high, because oil is not escaping. It's actually not going where it's supposed to go, but it's not escaping anywhere, and the gallery is going to still be pressurized. But still we want to make sure that the oil galleries are not plugged, and of course we're going to have to check all the tolerances. I mean, the crankshaft journals, the camshaft journals, and all that. We need to make sure that the tolerances here are nice and tight and oil is not escaping from there. So enough talking, let's do some measuring now, which is also not a very interesting part, but like I said, we need to go through it. Okay, so first of all, let's start with the oil pump. And I don't remember any of the measurements, which is good, because I rebuilt many TR6 engines and I kind of remember some of the measurements, which sometimes can be biasing your measurements, especially when you're using filler gauges. Sometimes, believe me, even I do that. I try to convince myself that I'm within measurements. So here though, I don't remember any of the measurements, which is good. I'm assuming they're close to the TR6 and TR4. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna measure everything. The pump, the crankshaft, the camshaft, the cylinders and everything. We're gonna record the measurements, and only then we're gonna go and find the spec. So this way we're not gonna be biased. So there are three measurements here that we need to know. Let me show you first the pump. So anyway, that looks like a new pump. So we have inner rotor, we have outer rotor, and we have the pump body. So how the pumping process happens is very interesting. It's like a multiple syringes. It's like 5 syringes that constantly suck and push, suck and push. So the oil comes through this hole and it gets delivered into this hole, into this square hole, which has an opening down there. So this is where the syringe pulls from, and this is on the other side where it is pushing it into. So we suck from the bottom, push into the top. So when we have the two rotors like this, what happens is, now look at this here, we don't have any cavity, like only this area here, right? As it moves above the input of the pump, which is here at the bottom, we know, right here at the bottom, this cavity becomes bigger and bigger. So we continue watching this cavity. It becomes bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So now it is sucking from the hole there. And as it starts going now above the output, you see already at the bottom, I don't know if you can see it, but we are already above the output of the pump, which is on this side and the top. Now the cavity starts becoming smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and now the syringe is empty into that hole, and now continues traveling, and as it comes here it starts pulling again, starts sucking from this hole, and then it goes and it gets pushed out into that hole. So it happens 4 times per revolution, even though we have 5 cavities here. Anyways, so that's how it works. But again, you can imagine oil can escape from one cavity into the other, right? If the tolerance here is too loose. So now that's what we want to do. We want to make sure that here we don't have a lot of space. And that's the most important, between the inner and the outer rotor. Also the space between the outer rotor and the body is important. Also between the cover and these parts here, the space is important. So all these 3 measurements are important. So let's see. So we're gonna put them in this position where they are perfectly closed. Oh, that's tight. That's way below 4, which is good. Which is very good actually. Let's see, 2 then. Wow, that's less than 2 even. That's 2 tau. Okay, 2. That's pretty tight there. So we have 2 tau here. Okay, let's try 0.4. Yeah, this one, even 2 is tight. That's good. Then this one. Yeah. I think the tolerance here is about 4. What about the outer? Again, I'm gonna try with the 4. No, I can definitely not shove 4 there. I can shove the 2. And this is tricky because it needs to bend, but I think 2 is pretty good. Okay, then we're gonna check the cover for scratches, because that's also an area where oil can escape from one gallery to the other. There are no scratches. What about the bottom? I didn't see anything at the bottom. Here in this area, no, there's no scratches. Okay, well, let's check. So this is a parallel from my lathe. So this is a precision tool. Okay, it's super tight. Ah, okay, I put it in. That's 2. Let's try 2.5. So that's 25 tenths, which is 2.5 tau. And this can't go. So we have 2, 2, and 2 everywhere. So this is a pretty good oil pump. But as you can see, it was siliconed in place. So anyway, I think it's a good oil pump. We don't need to do anything with it. We're gonna clean it and install it. All right, so here we have the oil pump measurements, inner to outer rotor, outer to body, and top face. All of them are 2000s. Now we have the crankshaft. We're gonna measure the mains and the connecting rod bearings. When we're measuring the main bearings, and especially the one, I think it was the furthermost one, the actual bearing, even though these were new bearings, the actual bearing was showing wear only on one side, nothing on the other. So there's a slight possibility that we have a taper. So if the measurement in one end of the journal is bigger than the measurement on the other end of the journal, then we have a gap on one side, and that's also a possibility where our oil can escape. So let's check our micrometer. So this is 1 to 2 inches, this micrometer. We have a 1-inch gauge here. Just clean it. Make sure there's nothing here on the face of the anvils. And our micrometer shows exactly 1 inch here. So perfect. So let's start with the middle one, because the way we have it set up, and we're gonna move after that. So that's number 2. Okay, so this is one side. This is 1.9, So that's 75 plus 15 is 90. So 1.990 and then 9. Okay, let's check the right side. It is the same thing, 1.990. So these are very consistent here in this direction, but we're gonna measure also in the other direction, like across. I don't have the locking pin here, so that's why I'm so careful. Wow, that's also super consistent. Let's check number 3. Now it's gonna fall on me. So this one is very little bit smaller. So this is 1.998 or 9. But let's take 3 more measurements here. This is the same. Maybe 8. So 1.998, just in case. Now let's turn it 90 degrees. Exactly the same. 9 at the end. And exactly the same with 9 at the end. Yeah, that's close to 91. So you see, this one might be showing a little bit of taper. I'll do that again. You see here, we're almost 92. Let me do that again. Yeah, it doesn't matter how many times I measure it. You see here. So that's 0.991, 5 or 6 actually. So this is where our taper is. Okay, I'm gonna measure it a few more times. I want to make sure that I'm not making a mistake here, but half a thou of a taper and such a short distance, I think that's a serious problem. Yeah, keeps showing me the same thing. So that's 6/10 or half a thou, more than half a thou difference between inner and outer here. I'm gonna go bring the bearing. You see, this is the bearing and it's exactly showing us what we just measured. So that's number 1 cap. That's closer to the, actually let's take it to the block. So that's our cylinder 1, that's our cap number 1, and that's how it was installed. This is our one here, you see it? And that's how it was installed. I'm assuming that's how they were supposed to be. Are they stamped here, like on the TR6? Let's see. On the TR6 blocks and on TR4 actually, you have the same numbers stamped here on the side of the block. I don't see them here though. Doesn't look like it. Is it on this side? No. Well, on TR6 you have them stamped here as well, and the direction in which you read it here must be the same direction here, so it can't be like that. But anyways, I know for a fact, when I checked, that they were installed this way, and look at that. The bearing is worn more on the inside, not in here, so it's quite possible that our oil was escaping from this hole in this direction. We're going to continue measuring, but I think half a thou taper on such a small distance is a big problem. Also, I don't know how close to the tolerance we are in general with that 1.99 whatever. So I'm going to measure the connecting rods as well, and the cylinders and the camshaft the same way, and then we're going to compare everything with the spec. Okay, I just measured the connecting rod bearings and we have an issue there, and I measured the camshaft as well. So let's talk about the camshaft first. So here I measured the journals, of course. I haven't measured the lift. The lift we're gonna measure as well, but we're gonna go in and we're gonna put it back in the engine. I think it's gonna be easier. I measured the journals and they are all within 5/10, like half a thou, but I think this is not a big deal. But let's talk about the crankshaft, the connecting rod bearings. So look at that. This is number 1 journal. We have 1.6155 in one direction, and then we have 1.6159, so 4/10 difference between 90 degrees measurement. So we have out of round there. Let me show you actually. So that was number 1. So I measured it this way and then I measured it this way. So I'm looking for out of round here. I don't have much room to measure taper, but I can measure out of round. So number 2 was the one that is giving me some really bad measurements actually. So you see, number 2, in one direction it's showing me 1.6151, in the other direction it's showing me 1.6159. So that's 8/10 thousandths difference, which is 0.8 thou, almost 1 thou. That's serious out of round for such a small diameter. So let's measure it again, like I did measure multiple times. Like I'm gonna put it, because I have the hole here, so I'm gonna put it a little bit off the hole in this direction. Okay. So it's 1.615 8 or 9. And let's measure it in this direction. 1.6151. That's a serious out of round, I think. And then we have the same for number 3. Here we have from 1/10 to 6/10, so that's 5/10 or half a thou, and here we have 3/10 or 0.3 thou. So I think this crankshaft needs to be machined again. I think that's our main issue. But again, I don't even know what the spec is, so we're gonna compare it to the spec as well. But I want to go and measure the lift on the camshaft on each of the lobes and check that. Okay, let me show you how we're gonna measure the lobes now. It's interesting because this camshaft looks like it's new actually. I don't see any... actually it says something here. Can you make something out of this? But that's the only stamping that I see here. Anyways, let's put it back in. While everything is still oily, we're gonna take number one tappet, number one push rod, and we're gonna take a dial gauge with a magnetic stand, and we're gonna put it on top of the push rod. So I'm hoping that the spring on the dial gauge is gonna be strong enough to push the push rod down. So here it goes up, but it stays up. Okay, we're gonna have to help it, but now it's all the way down. Now it went even lower now. Okay, let's zero it here now. I don't know how come it went even lower. Okay, let's do that again. 1, 2, 40. 1, 241. Okay, let's push it down again. Okay, I don't know how much it needs to be, but that sounds about right for TR6, for example. The stock camshaft is 247, I think, 250. It's not so critical for a tower too. It's always okay. Okay, let's try. 100, 200, and 40. 43 and a half, 43. And then as we continue, it goes back to 0. Oh, look at that, this one. A little bit more than 0, so 144, let's go with. I'm curious about number 4, that's the one that I had suspicions about. But we're gonna get there. First, number 3. Okay, 242. Let's see if it's gonna go back to 0. Yeah, 242. Okay, so that's my 0. That's number 4, right? So that's the one that I was suspicious about. And I was wrong. That's actually 246. So it's good. So we don't need a new camshaft. That is great. Okay, and while we're here, let's also check display between the bushing and the drive gear. Could be a little bit tighter, but I think it's good. Actually, I'm gonna check the price of the bushing. If it's not too expensive, we might order a new one. You see, there's quite a bit of play here. I don't know how much the play here needs to be. There's no good way of measuring this, is there? Whatever the actual play is gets amplified all the way up there, right? Because it is way above the bushing. That's like 1.5 inches or how much? That's like 1.5 inches or 2 inches above the bushing. Let's also find the spring and measure it, because I think if it is the same as the TR6, it needs to be 4 centimeters long, and it might be shorter here. So this is the relief valve that I was talking about with the springs. Yeah, it looks like the TR6 spring. I'm pretty sure they use the same whatever. So switch it to metric. I remember this measurement, 4 centimeters. Oh yeah, that's like way too short. So it looks like we have many little problems that a little here, a little there, and they add up to a big problem, I guess. I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna machine the crankshaft one more time. We're gonna get the next size bearings, which is gonna be 020, a new spring here, and maybe a new bushing for the distributor drive gear. And let's take a look at the camshaft bearings. Okay, so these are the camshaft bearings, and looks like they're new, but I feel a little bit of a scratch here at the bottom. See that one? I don't know, they don't look bad, but you know what? We can get new ones just in case to make sure that we have everything new. They're not that expensive, I think. I hope. Okay, time to measure our cylinders. And I know if you're regular viewer of the channel, you've probably seen this many times in TR6 and TR4 videos, but I'm gonna explain it one more time for the guys who just searched for how do I measure my Spitfire cylinders and they fell on this video. I want to explain it for them as well. So first of all, of course, we want to see what the general dimension of this cylinder is, but this dimension may vary a little bit. So we're looking for the biggest dimension found anywhere inside this cylinder, because if that's bigger than what our tolerance is, even if it's just one area of the cylinder, then this entire cylinder is scrap. It's gonna need to be bored out to the next size. But also we need to find whether this cylinder is still round. What if it became oval? They tend to do that. As the piston goes up and down, you know, the connecting rod goes like this and it pushes it in one direction, then in the other direction. So normally the cylinders become oval in this direction. And also what happens is the cylinders become tapered as they're worn. So we're gonna have to take multiple measurements inside this cylinder and compare them and figure out whether we have oval, whether we have taper, and what is our biggest measurement. So we're gonna have top, center, and bottom measurement, and then in each of these three depths we're gonna take three different measurements. One is gonna be like this. That's gonna be our first position. Our second position is gonna be 60 degrees, more or less, of course, in clockwise direction. And our third position is gonna be 60 degrees in our counterclockwise direction from center. So when we take all these 3, 6, 9 measurements, then we can compare the 3 on the top and see if the cylinder is oval, then the 3 in the center and 3 in the bottom, and then we're gonna take all the measurements from position number 1, let's say, from top, from the center, and from the bottom. That's gonna give us an idea whether the cylinder is tapered. So what I did here is, first of all, I took a measurement with my caliper, literally, but I just measured roughly, and the cylinder is a little bit over 2.91 inches. So I set this dial gauge to 2.91, and I set my bore gauge to show 0 when it is at exactly this dimension, you see? So now if I measure the cylinder and it shows 10 tau, this means that this is 2.91 plus 10 tau. So let's get crack-a-lacking. So we're gonna measure our 3 top ones first. So this is 10, 11, 12 and a half. So I made myself here a chart, so top, center and bottom, and first, second and third position. And here I wrote down the measurement in which my gauge shows 0, which is 2.91. Now on top of that 2.91, I have another 0.012, that's 12 tau, but I had 12 and a half. So I have another number here after the decimal. So I have 125. That's 125 ten-thousandths of an inch, or 125 tenths as they call them. Yeah, correct. Okay, so that's my first position. Now let's go to my second position. You're gonna have to trust me for this one. 12.5, the same. And let's see this one you're gonna see better. This is exactly the same, 12.5. So we have absolutely no out of round on this cylinder. Now let's measure lower, and I can see actually the shiny part of the cylinder. I don't know if you're gonna see it. Yeah, you can see the shiny part of the cylinder. That's where the piston is going up and down, so I'm gonna measure more or less somewhere in the middle of this shiny part. Also 125, and this is 128, let's say. This one to 126, and now let's measure at the bottom of the shiny part. See, this is a little bit more, so that's 130 or 13 thou exactly. 129 and 129. Okay, so the three top positions give us the out of round. So here we have the exact same number for all three. So out of round here is 0. Here we have 125, 128 and 126. So our smallest one is 125, our biggest is 128. So we have out of round here of 0.0003. That's 3 10,000ths of an inch, or 0.3 thou. So it is very, very little out of round. Here we have from 29 to 30, right? So here we have 0.0001. Now for taper, we're going to compare them in this direction. All three measurements in first position. So 125, 125, 130. So here at the bottom we have a little bit of taper, which is normal, but it is from 25 to 30, that's 0.0005, which is 5/10 or half a thou. Here we have from 5 to 9, so 0.0004, and here we have from 5 to 9, 0.0004. And now we're going to look for our biggest measurement in this cylinder, which is this one. Our out of round, again, we're going to look for the biggest one. This is 3, 0.003. Taper, 5.0005. And our biggest measurement is 2.9100 plus 2.013. So 2.9230 is our biggest measurement in this cylinder. Okay, that's what's important to know for this cylinder. I'm gonna do the same for the other three, and then we're gonna pull out the spec and we will see how close to the spec we are with this number. Okay, so I measured everything. We saw first cylinder together. Number 2 is a little bit smaller than number 1. Look here, the numbers are 125, 125. Here we are 113, so almost a thou smaller at the top. And the rest of the numbers are similar to this. So again, as a taper and out of round, this cylinder is perfect, but it is a little bit smaller than this one. So this means the piston rings are tighter inside, right? So it's normal that this cylinder has higher compression than this one. And out of round is 2 10,000ths, taper is 3 10,000ths, which is considered nothing. I think we have like 1.5 thou and something like that in out of round. I think 12 for out of round. The maximum measurement on this cylinder is 2.9216, which brings it 14 tenths or 1.4 thou lower than these cylinders. Then we come to the number 3. Out of round is only 3 tenths, taper is only 4 tenths, so that's perfect. The maximum measurement is 2.9212, which is 18 tenths smaller than this one, almost 2 thou smaller. And then look at number 4, that's the cylinder with the highest compression. We had 150 psi compression here. Out of round and taper are again within the limits, no problem there, and the maximum measurement is 2.9201, so that is almost 3 thou, 29 tenths smaller than cylinder number 1. So that explains the difference in the compression between 1 and 4. It is 3 thou smaller. So now when we go and find the spec, I'm assuming that this is gonna be the spec 2.900, but because we have oversized pistons by 20 thou, that's why this measurement is 2.9200. But I'm pretty sure this cylinder is up to spec, and this is 3 thou bigger, and that explains everything. So this means we're gonna have to bore the cylinders up to the next size, which is 30 over, and then we're gonna need new pistons and new rings, and we have brand new ones already. This is a shame. Okay, let's go find the spec. I don't have a paper manual, so this manual for Spitfire is the one that my friend Steve sent me. You know that YouTube channel, right? Hero 1360 and Spitfire 4 and Mark 3. Okay, so that's where we fall. Half thou to 1 thou over 2 inches for our main journal. Connecting rod is 1.626 to 1.627. That's a pretty big tolerance. The crankshaft end float needs to be from 4 to 8 thou. That's we're gonna measure. Camshaft journal diameter. Okay, so this is the dimension. What did we have? Our camshaft corresponds to this one more than this one. 1.84, definitely way smaller than this one. Oil pump clearance between outer rotor and body 8 thou. Well, we had 2. So we are good. Max permissible clearance between outer and inner rotor is 10 thou. We had 2. So here we're good with the pump. Distributor drive gear and float, that's up and down. Spindle diameter and bush bore. So we have the bore of the bush here. If we can measure it, it needs to be exactly 500. So we can measure that. Oil pressure relief valve, spring, free length 39.11, so it's almost 1 millimeter less than 4 centimeters, so we are 1 millimeter short, not 2. Cylinder bore, okay, I don't know what grade cylinders we have. Now the pistons used to have grades, like smaller to bigger. This is 728, 728, 729, so they go by half a thou. But the new pistons, they don't have grades anymore, so we're gonna take the G grade as our spec, right? All right, I think we have everything now, so let's compare the spec to what we have. So the oil pump checks out. Now the main bearings, we already know that the crankshaft needs to be machined because of the taper, but let's compare the other two. So 1.9910, and here we have 2.0010. So this is exactly 10 under this. So this is good for 10, this is good for 10, this is good for 0.010 bearings, except this one is out of round. But you see the smaller measurement is equal to this. This is the one that is a little bit bigger. I'm gonna talk to the machine shop. I don't know if they're gonna be able to machine only the taper away and bring it back to this measurement, because if that is the case, then we're gonna be good for 0.10 here as well. The problem is with the connecting rod journals, or the pins as they call them. Here we're all over the place. Here we're out of round. So let's just work with the smaller measurement. So this one is from 155 to 260, that's 105, right? That's 109, that's 109, that's 108. These are almost 11 thou under the spec. Even if the out of round can be taken away in the machine shop, they're still gonna be at least 11 thou under the spec. I think since they're gonna be machined, maybe we should just go to 0.20 and forget about it. Camshaft journals, like we said, this is the spec for Spitfire 4 the spec for Herald 1360 and for Spitfire 4 and Mark 3. So we still have to measure the bearings and see what they're gonna say. The lobes, we don't have the measurements, but they are consistent, so I'm sure they check out. And then the cylinders. So the spec is 7284 and we have 9230. Oh my god. Do we have a 1500 engine here? Huh. I just went and I checked online because I don't have the manual for Spitfire 1500, and the bore for Spitfire 1500 is 2.9010. So what we have here is a 1500 Bock, and if we compare these numbers now with this spec for 1500, then here we are exactly 20 over for this cylinder. Here we are okay, sorry, I made a mess. I'm gonna cover this because I made a mess. So that's our spec. From 010 to 201 we have 0.0191. That's how much over we are, which is very close to the 0.020 that we are looking for, right? Because that's our pistons. Here we are 19.1 over. Here we are 202 over. This is 20.6 tau. But here, this is 9230, right? So here we are 220 tenths or 22 tau over. So we're gonna have to go to the next size, I guess. So okay, so that's it, but it is really confusing to me. Is it possible that they bored it out? If it is a 1300 engine and they bored it out, let's look at that. I don't think it's possible. I don't know, I'm not a Spitfire guru, I'm not a Spitfire expert, but somebody can tell me if that's possible or not. Anyway, that gives us an idea what we need with everything here and what's gonna happen next. I actually took apart this shaft as well, the rocker shaft, and as you can see here, there's areas that are pretty bad. This is all nail catcher here. So this is the one that I saw that was bad, and there's some other ones too. We're gonna order a new one of these. We're gonna order hardened seats. Unfortunately, we're gonna need new pistons in this case. The crank, the block, and the head are gonna have to go to the machine shop. But at least we don't need new valves because these are good. We don't need a new pump. This one is good, and yeah, we have a pretty good idea of what we're gonna need now. All right, it's the next day, and I was having some thoughts yesterday about this engine. Something is not right. If this engine is 1500 cc, as the pistons show us, then we should have a beefier crankshaft as well, right? This is definitely a 1300 crankshaft. So what's going on here with this engine? Well, let me show you something else. I looked up this number, and FE is for 1300 engines, or 1296, or whatever the exact number is. So my suspicion here turns out to be right. I've never heard of anybody doing that, but apparently it's possible to be done. The thing is, it hasn't only been bored out to 1500, but it was bored out 20 more tau, because it's 20 over the spec for 1500. Can we make it 30 over? I don't think it's a good idea. I mean, I don't want to make the bore bigger than what it is already. And when I look at my numbers here, yes, between cylinder number 4 and number 1, there's 3 tau difference. So the only reason why we want to bore out to the next size is because of cylinder number 1, right? Because it is bigger than the spec. But when I was talking about 3 tau yesterday, I didn't think of that it is 3 tau difference between number 1 and number 4, but number 4 is 1 tau smaller than the spec, so number 1 is only 2 tau bigger than the spec, which is not unseen before. I mean, I assembled engines with 2 thou bigger than the spec cylinders, and I don't think that would be a big issue. And I think, considering this current situation with this engine, I think it's a better idea if we don't bore it out anymore, because it is already bored out a lot. And yes, we had low compression on cylinder number 1, but I think the whole engine, the low compression, was caused by the cylinders being so smooth. Like, they just need to be deglazed, and I think if we deglaze them, the compression is gonna come back. I'm pretty sure about that. You know what? I'm gonna take the piston rings out of piston number 1, and I'll put them inside here, and let's see what the difference in the gap is gonna be when we use them here and here. So that's number 2 first. Yeah, it looks like a big gap. Yeah, that's a very big gap. That's what worries me. That looks like 20 and over this gap. So that's 20 thou. Look. 20 fits like a charm there. 21. Yeah, 21 is too tight. So it's exactly 20 thou. Let's put this in number 4. Like, how do you lose a piston with a... Holy crap. Don't look for it, found it. Much smaller here, you see. What are we gonna do with this cylinder? Why did they overbore it? Sure, this is like less than 14. Yeah, 14 is too tight. 13. So it's 13 here, it's 20 here. You know what? I'm gonna take all the piston rings out, and I'm gonna test them in the engine. If I can find 2 rings, one first and one second ring, that fit better in this cylinder, I'm gonna keep it as it is. If not, if I can't find, then unfortunately we're gonna have to go to the next size, because 20 gap is too big. 10 to 14 is where we want to be. Well, believe it or not, I was able to arrange number 2 rings in a way that is perfect for all the cylinders. I don't know how that happened. Where did this ring come from? But look, that's 15 thou and doesn't fit. That's good. 14 thou fits. So we have 14 thou gap here. Here this is, you know, this is almost 15 now. This one is a little bit bigger. Yeah, this is 15. That's the only one that's a little bit bigger. But this is 14. 15, yeah, 15. Now these two are 15. This one is tight. This one is 14. So we have 14, 15, 15, 14. And you know what? I'm happy with that. This is how I'm gonna leave them. So that's number 2 though. Let's see if we're gonna be lucky to do the same with number 1. Okay, here it's not so encouraging. I mean, this gap is not much bigger than the other ones, but the problem is that the other ones are big too. Like 17 is tight here, but 16 works just fine. So this is 16, but these two are 17. Actually, 16, 17, yeah, 17 fits. And it fits here too. This one is tight. This one is even tight for 16, so this one is 15. So we have 15, 17, 17, 16. That's a little bit too much, but you know what? If we order new rings, maybe they're gonna be better. They're gonna give us better gap. Yeah, that's what we're gonna do. But first, let's hone these quickly, or deglaze them quickly, and see if that's gonna make any difference. So remember, 17, 6, what was it? Now I forgot. 15, 17, 17, 16, right? Okay. All right. Spray WD-40. Let's see now. We don't want to take metal off, we just want to deglaze the surface. Let's see, maybe a little bit more, just one more round. You know what? That's enough now. There's such a big difference. Okay, let me show you a closer view. Okay, so that's what we have in this cylinder, and that's what we don't have in the other cylinders. Okay, so I'm gonna do the same quickly on the other three, and then we're gonna put the rings again. All right, here we are again, and I don't see visually any difference, I mean, in the gap. And my eye is actually pretty good in measuring stuff, so let's start with the 17, right? These were 17 here, so they are still exactly 7. Even 17 is a little bit tighter, but yeah. But 17 doesn't fit here, so nothing changed. I mean, we didn't make the cylinders bigger. 16 fits, but 16 doesn't fit here. 15 fits, so still the same. Perfect. You know what? We're gonna keep the block as it is. We're gonna order new rings only. We're gonna keep the same pistons, and we're hoping that they're gonna be a little bit bigger, but if we are able to bring even these gaps smaller, that's gonna be perfect. So I think that's a good decision for now. All right, so I think that was a lot of measurements and a lot of boring stuff. I hope I didn't bore you to death, but at least we're not gonna have to bore the cylinders out. I mean, I'm afraid like we're gonna go too close to the galleries. I've never heard of anyone doing that, and apparently it's been done, so now we know that it is possible. But anyways, let's not make this video longer than what it is already. Thank you so much, guys, for sticking around for such a boring stuff. Numbers, looking through numbers, measurements, etc., etc. I appreciate it a lot. Thank you for your support. Thank you for watching, commenting, subscribing, and sharing. And stay tuned for the next episodes, in which hopefully we're gonna have parts already, and we're gonna start assembling. So anyways, I'm rambling again. Thank you so much, guys. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.